and welcome to a Book a Day podcast. First of all, Happy New Year to each one of you. It just feels like yesterday when I started this podcast from my room, and when I look back, it's been quite a few years, and it feels truly humbling and wonderful to be able to create this reading community where I get to talk about books and you listen. And that means quite a lot. So, thank you for that. Keep listening, keep writing to me, give me your feedback, and I would continue to do the kind of work that I do here. So, coming back to where we were the last time, we are doing the Bible series, and I'm here narrating the story of the Bible. So far, we had seen Moses' journey, how he brings his people from Egypt to Israel, and now we are in Israel, and the story continues for the next few hundred years. And this is what I'll talk about in today's episode. Let's start then. So now the Israelites, they were in Israel, their chosen land. God had chosen it for them. And now it was time to decide a king. Jehovah, at that point, the God, he tells Samuel to make Saul the first king. Although Saul himself, he wasn't quite sure about his own stature. He thought he came from a small tribe from Israel and wasn't really worthy enough. But it was God's decision. Besides, even if Saul did not see himself like that, a lot of other people saw him differently. They saw him as a rich man, somebody who was handsome, who was tall and good in physique. He was a fast runner, he was a strong man. So people really thought he was going to be a good king. And so it was decided, and they started chanting, "Long live the king." At the same time, we have to keep in mind the struggles were ongoing in Israel. And of course, they have continued till today. But even at that point, there were a lot of other groups. There were, of course, Philistines, the people from that land. And then there were many other groups, many other small kingdoms, which kept fighting with these people of Israel. So there was a lot of turbulence, there were a lot of battles, and it wasn't really a quiet time back then even. So when all this turbulence is going on, what happens one day is thousands and thousands of Philistines, they come to fight against the Israelites. And Saul, of course, he's the king, he's supposed to lead. But what happens is back then, they used to practice this, that they would make a sacrifice or give a gift to Jehovah the God, and then they would go about their usual business. But Saul misses out on that, and Samuel although tries to remind him, but he doesn't listen. So he is more concerned about the battle and leaves his religious duties behind, and Samuel recognizes that he's made a mistake, that he has been disobedient to God, and which was quite a big sin back in those days. Now, as we have seen in the story so far, a lot of mistakes or crimes or sins that these people made in that time, they rarely go unpunished. And so it happened with Saul. And Samuel had recognized that probably is not going to be the king anymore. And then one day it happens. God really commands Samuel to go to one family's house where a young boy called David, he's there, and make him the king. He's really quite young and doesn't seem to be ready for the job. But that's what the God says, and that's what they do. And now we have the next king with us, although is not really given the charge yet, but it's decided that he is going to be the next king. And that happens after a wonderful story that I'm sure you must have heard a lot of times, the story of David and Goliath. So, this story takes place in one of these battles between the Philistines and Israel. On the Philistine side, we have this giant called Goliath, and everybody is scared when they see him. He comes over there with his giant stature and really makes fun of Israelites, how small they are, how stupid they are, and he mocks them that do you have those that guts that you can fight me? Do you have a man among yourself? So when David sees this, he's still quite young. He asks some of these soldiers, his on his side, on the Israeli side, that what will happen if a man goes out there and kills this Philistine giant? What will happen to that person? What will he get? So they tell him that Saul, the king, will give that man a lot of riches, and he will also give his own daughter as a wife to that person. So that's the reward they are talking about. But at the same time, they are still suspicious. They think that nobody's going to really defeat this giant. That's not going to happen. But then David insists. He says that I am going to fight. And although people around him, the soldiers, they try to stop him, but eventually he says, I'm confident I'll manage it. And so he goes. He prepares his slingshot, and he just goes straight to Goliath, challenges him, and says, just come to me, and I'll give your body to the birds and animals to eat. That sounds like a funny thing to say to a giant, but that's how he goes about it. And as the two face each other, he takes out his slingshot, takes a stone from his bag, and then fires the shot. The stone flies straight into Goliath's head, and he falls down, dead, right there. So, he has done what he had planned to, and now suddenly, David becomes a hero. And everybody in the kingdom, they start singing praises, they start singing songs to honor David. And the king, of course, he has to give all the rewards to David. But at the same time, this king, Saul, he is quite jealous of David. When he sees that everybody is praising David, they are saying that Saul has killed thousands, but David has killed tens of thousands by killing this giant. So the king thinks and plans to kill David. Now, although he's given his daughter to this man, but he's still so jealous and so spiteful that he wants to kill this man, and he tries this multiple times. He just throws his arrows, he attempts to kill him. And David's really disturbed by that. That king right there is just gone mad about it and is trying to kill him. So one day he leaves that place and goes to another city. Now he goes to stay in a remote land, and he decides that he'll stay in a cave. It's more like a hiding place so that the king doesn't really find out. his brothers and his close family members, they have also joined him there. And it's like a small tribe, and David becomes this tribe's leader. So it is there that he meets this woman called Abigail. The Abigail, she was at that point wife of Nabal, who was a rich landowner, and he had a lot of property, cattle, sheep and goats, and all those riches that those people used to have. But at the same time, this guy Nabal, he was quite mean and was quite stingy, not really generous. So one of these days, when David's tribe members, they go to him and ask for some certain favors, in exchange for certain help. So this mean man, he doesn't really keep his promises, and eventually what happens is David decides to kill him. And when David is on his way to kill Nabal, then he meets this woman, his wife Abigail, who says that don't really kill my husband, and I will, I have this food, I can give it to you, I can help your people. So the matter is settled there. And another thing that happens is these two, they fall in love, and eventually after a certain point, when the man dies, Nabal, the mean man, his wife Abigail, she gets married to David. On the other side, the king of Israel, Saul, he is looking for David. He wants to kill this guy. Also, David is also trying from his side. He's sending his spies, and he's thinking that before the king comes and kill me, I have to plan something. So he's also trying. He's also making these conceited efforts from his side. So in the meantime, David moves to the land of Philistines. He's portraying himself as the enemy of the king of Israel, although he's not really the enemy of Israel, but he's kind of tricking those people. He's telling that I'm on your side, but he's not truly on their side. He's just against the king. And at one point, what happens is there's a battle between the Philistines and Israel, and the king gets killed. And at that point, David, he no longer remains in Philistine, and he goes back to Israel. And this time, once again, there are a lot of battles, and eventually David is able to capture a lot of land, and one of them is a beautiful city called Jerusalem. So once he captures that, he becomes the king now. And once again, at least for some time, life becomes good. David is a good ruler. God is happy with him. His people are happy with him. And everything is going fine. But as you have seen so far, all these people, the people of Israel, their kings, everybody, they are quite vulnerable, and they keep making certain mistakes over and over again. And so does David. What really happens is there's a soldier and one of his wives. The wife's name is Uriah. David looks at her while the soldier is away fighting, and he falls for her. And then he makes love to her, and then she is going to have a baby. When he finds that out, what he does is he sends that her husband to fight in a place where he's sure that this guy is going to die, and so that the legitimate child gets some legitimacy. So the soldier dies, and David marries her. Of course, once again, God is watching all this, and he's not really happy. When he comes to David and shows the anger, David admits his mistake and apologizes. But the God still says, I'm going to forgive you in some ways. But since you have done all these bad things, a lot of trouble is going to come in your family, in your house as well. And as we find out, that is what happens over the course of time. First of all, this newly married wife, she dies. Then David's other son, the firstborn son, he gets his sister alone and forces, himself upon her. Then the other brother who notices this, he gets angry and he murders that brother. So a lot of trouble happens. And while all this trouble was going on, that soldier's wife with whom David made love and gave birth to a son, he was born before, of course, that wife died, and then his name was Solomon, and he now is supposed to be the next king, especially when at the age of 70 his father David, he dies. So Solomon becomes the next king. He's just a teenager when he becomes the king, but still he's really wise, and he's quite a sincere follower of the God, and does his duties and jobs perfectly. In fact, this is what he had asked the God when he had met him for the first time, that I want wisdom more than riches and glory. I want wisdom. And God was happy, so he gave him all the wisdom. But at the same time, he was so happy that he said, other than wisdom, you're also going to get the riches and the glory as well. And then you hear about the stories of Solomon's wisdom, how he makes his decisions. So one story goes like this. What happens one day is there are two women. They come to him with a problem. So these two women, they live in the same house, and one of them she says that I gave birth to a boy, and 2 days later, the other woman also gave birth to a boy, but the other one's baby was dead. So what she did was she put her dead child next to me and took my baby away. And the other woman, of course, refuses. She says, no, I wouldn't do that. It was her baby that was born dead and mine was fine. So what Solomon does in that situation, he says, okay, I don't have any evidence, I don't have any other choice. What you should do is just cut this baby into half and give these two women half. So now one of these women agrees to that and one woman doesn't. So the woman who doesn't agree, he knows that she is the actual mother. And so he makes that decision. So we come to know about his wisdom and his ability to make wise choices. At the same time, since he's committed to God, then he goes on to build the temple also. It was a long pending job, and it was Solomon that finally finishes this task. Of course, he employed a lot of men, tens of thousands of men, and they work on it day and night, and then build this temple where their covenant is placed, and where they are going to worship to Jehovah. Now, once again, things are fine, everything is going well, God is happy, people are happy, but as I've told you, once again, people keep making certain mistakes here and there. What happens is, this time, Solomon, since he's married many women from different cultures, different practices, and not all of those queens, they marry Jehovah. Some of them are polytheists, some worship to different gods. And once they start doing that, once again, Jehovah gets angry and he says that I will take the kingdom away from you, Solomon, and I will give it to another man. I may not do this in your lifetime, but maybe later you are going to lose this kingdom. Now, sadly, that's what happens. So, King Solomon, he rules for 40 years and then he dies. And after his death, his son, who's the next king, is not really a good one. So, the cracks begin to appear, the divide becomes more obvious, and when the kingdom is weak from the inside, the outsiders also take advantage of it. The king of Egypt attacks and loots the temple, takes all the riches from it, and the state of Israel, it starts to weaken. And generation after generation, we see that the troubles really keep expanding. The outsiders are invading, and the state is really getting worse. And at one point, the Babylonians, when they attack, they burn down Jerusalem, and they kill a lot of Israelites, and those who are not killed are taken as prisoners to Babylon. But that was really the prophecy also. That was Jehovah and as well as his prophets warning that if people changed their lifestyle, they did not really follow the lifestyle they were supposed to, they did not worship Jehovah, bad things would happen, and that's what happened. So it's a really interesting philosophical, at least theological point here, because anybody can ask this question, that why did the God let this happen, the destruction of the temple and destruction of Israel and death and capture of the Israelites? Why would God let it happen if they were the chosen people? And the answer that we find is that because they did not listen to him. And God is quite strict when it comes to punishing people for their crimes. And he is expecting those people to do what he has asked them to do. Now, when Babylonians have captured all these Israelites, there were a handful of people, there were a few people that were allowed to stay in Israel, but they are still living under fear. They know bad things would happen to them. So a lot of them, the remaining ones, they flee to Egypt. And eventually, we find that the land of Israel is without any people at all. And for 70 years, no one lives in the land. It's completely empty. And at that point, God, Jehovah, once again promises that he will bring his people back to the land after 70 years. So we know if God has promised that so it would happen, and they would come back. But in the meantime, all those people, those who are in Babylon, what's happening to them? And what happens to people when they come back to Israel? All this and more, especially the birth of Jesus and his arrival, we are going to find that out in the next episode. So keep following this. Don't miss the next episode, because then we are going to get to the most important part of this story. And thank you once again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and let's continue the story in the next episode. Thank you.